Thank you very much for coming, especially after a hard evening in the bar last night. My name is Adam G. I'm Multiplatform Commissioner for Features and Factual Entertainment at Channel 4. And what we're going to be doing today is something of a sort of case study slash dissection of how the multi-platform campaigning worked around this three-part documentary. On my left you have Nick Underhill, Joe Haslam, and on my right Will Anderson. They're going to explain who they are and what they did on this shortly. But the point of the session really is to give you three perspectives and a sort of beginning to end chronology on this programme and its multi-platform dimension. So in effect, what you've got represented here is the TV dimension, the digital dimension, the social media dimension, and the commissioner dimension. And between that, hopefully there'll be something in it for everyone in the audience. So to kick off, I'm just going to ask everyone to say who they are, what they did on it, and then we'll tell you a bit about the project. So starting from Will, I think.
Hi everyone, I'm the series producer and director of the three programmes. Before starting this, I had no Facebook page, I had never been on Twitter, I knew nothing about the social networking or particularly the digital world, and in the last 6 months I've learned quite a lot about it all.
Hi everybody, I'm Jo Haslam and I'm the cross-platform producer for Keo Films, and I was the digital project lead on EU's Fish Fight. I looked after the site and also all of the social media elements.
Hi, I'm Nick Underhill, the Managing Director of Keo Digital. I look after the day-to-day and the strategic elements of the digital division. We're about 10 people. We do everything from development, design, implementation and maintenance of various sites, things like River Cottage, Fish Fight obviously, Land Share and Energy Share, our latest project. On this particular project I looked after the kind of commissioning relationship, the legal aspects and budget and resources and those kind of exciting things. This is live by the way, so you can text to this now and get Hugh to do various things, so join the campaign if you haven't.
I think probably the quickest way to get everyone up to speed, just so that you've got an overall sense of the project, is we've got a short reel which kind of captures most of it. So if I could ask us to play the short reel, please.
The Fish Fight multi-platform campaign represents the gold standard in using TV and online media to inspire change in the real world. It's a model of how moving pictures, interactive media and social networking combine to create highly engaged users who together have the power to bring about significant results.
You can sign up to that, can't you? Yeah, 100%.
In November 2010, Fish Fight launched a viral video on YouTube highlighting the distressing and shameful practice of discarding, where up to half the fish caught in the North Sea are being thrown back dead. It immediately started to make waves. At the same time, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall was travelling around the UK filming a Channel 4 cross-platform series, drawing attention to the crazy European laws which make discarding compulsory.
In the North Sea, I saw tons of prime fish being thrown back dead, because to land it would be illegal under EU fishery laws.
20 quid for one fish. It's terrible, it's a damn disgrace.
In December, the fishfight.net website went live, with an online petition addressed to EU Fisheries Commissioner Maria Damanaki, exclusive video footage and compelling interactive editorial content.
Hey, how about that? 15,259 sign-ups. Finally, we're getting the public seriously exercised about the whole business of CFP reform.
The site worked closely with key NGOs and other Channel 4 chefs, Heston, Gordon and Jamie.
Brother, what are you doing? Causing trouble? Come on have a bit, Tiger. Deep fried canard, everyone!
I'm going to tweet and Facebook and do a viral video on YouTube. I mean, it's time to get this thing out there.
A carefully designed network of social media presences was also launched, including 2 Facebook and 2 Twitter accounts. interlinked with Channel 4 food.
Stop doing that. Really? Stop acting like a big fish fight.
Then, in January this year, Hugh's Fish Fight broadcast on Channel 4 as the core of the big fish fight season.
How many of you are going to get behind that campaign?
The audience immediately engaged and showed the strength of their feeling through online action. The results of the interplay between TV and networked media were dramatic. 1 million page impressions were clocked in just 3 hours after the final episode. During the 3 days of transmission, fishfight.net received 2 million page views. 30,000 people took the Sustainable Fish Eating quiz. 4,000 fish and chip shops were added to the Mackerel Mission map. 200,000 people liked the Fish Fight Facebook page. And, astonishingly, over 660,000 people have now signed the online petition. The campaign went viral, gathering support including help from celebrity tweeters like Stephen Fry, Dermot O'Leary and Coldplay, and stimulating international debate. Most importantly, the digital campaign started to have an impact in the real world. People all over the country are buying more sustainable species of fish and sharing their recipes on Facebook. After an email from Hugh, over 50,000 people emailed Princes, asking them to stop catching so many sharks and turtles in their tuna nets. And Princes have just announced that they will change their fishing methods by 2014. Thousands of people downloaded our letter-writing toolkit and sent messages to their MPs, asking them to support the Fish Fight campaign.
I applaud the Fish Fight campaign.
So far, 239 MPs have signed up to the cause. But most significantly of all, in March the EU Fisheries Commissioner called an extraordinary meeting to discuss the impact of the Fish Fight campaign and to begin the process of changing the law which will see the end of discards.
A fish fight campaign and so on, this is very important for us, very important.
By harnessing the power of television, interactive and networked media in a creative, fluid combination, the Fish Fight has emotionally engaged its audience and inspired them to take action and to push for change in the real world. The effects on the world's oceans are already being felt.
So there you have it in a nutshell. That's the sort of scope of the of the multi-platform project and the sense of some of its impact. I'm going to ask Nick just to sort of fill you in a bit more in terms of how the season worked as a whole, because there were 7 other programmes from a range of other indies. So Nick, can you just fill us in a bit on that?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a flavour of what we did there. In terms of the digital, essentially the digital commission, we were working with Channel 4 to fulfil their whole big food fight season, big fish fight season. So we weren't just working on Hugh's programming support, we were working across the board. So that meant that during the week when the season was on, we were creating a lot of the digital content for a range of the other chefs, Jamie, Heston, Gordon, and their programming, and running a hub on Facebook to do that.
So Hugh's Fish Fight is the name of the Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall series, and Big Fish Fight was the name of this overall season that ran across about 10 days in January. I'm just going to ask Joe to talk a little bit about the distinction between those two things, especially how it manifested itself online.
Yeah, so we had, there was a distinction, like Adam says, between the two, broadly because Hugh's Fish Fight had already started in line with the programme production process. We'd already launched a website, a Facebook page, and released a viral. And then as the season itself transmitted on Channel 4, we wanted to have a second but aligned social media presence that kind of covered off all of the different chefs, as Nick mentioned. So we had, for Big Fish Fight, a Facebook and Twitter platform, and then for Hugh's Fish Fight, also a Facebook and Twitter platform. So it worked well, they worked well together, but it was just that we were managing both of those simultaneously throughout transmission and ongoing really as well.
So there was a slight sort of, there was a distinction between those two two things in terms of what they were trying to do. On the one hand, around Hugh's fish fight, it was quite a specific political, with a capital P, campaign aimed at changing EU legislation. With Big Fish Fight, it was something broader that was trying to change people's consumption of fish. So it was a broader, slightly less political message, but nonetheless kind of an activist message, because in the short term, that's one of the most sort of useful things that people could do, was actually change what fish they were eating and how. So there was a real distinction between the real kind of activist, political viewers and users, and the ones that were coming with a slightly broader perspective and perhaps were just interested in cooking or eating. What I'd like to move on to is, we're going to try and give you the whole arc of the story of this project. So if I could ask Will just to give us a bit of a sense of where the idea came from.
Yeah, we did a campaign, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall did a campaign 3 or 4 years ago, I think, about chickens, about poultry welfare, as part of a Channel 4 food fight season. And that had an online petition in it as well. Channel 4 asked us to think of another food fight subject matter, and Hugh's always been a very passionate fisherman and fishes a lot and loves eating fish. And so, inspired by the Channel 4 BritDoc film, The End of the Line, which was about sustainability of fishing around the world and the problems with overfishing, which had a massive outreach and seemed to really get into people's attention, we thought that we'd go and take on fish. But we were very worried at the beginning that fish were not soft and sweet and cuddly like little chickens are, and that we were going to have real trouble engaging people in something that was just wet and slippery and a bit anonymous. But we got together a whole bunch of NGOs who were all working in fisheries, and we had several meetings with people to talk about what the big issues were. And during the course of those meetings, focused the whole thing down to this one central issue, which was discards and the amount of fish that is being thrown away every day in European waters because of these stupid rules. And then we decided that we should try and use the power of TV to try and actually do something about that in the real world and try and change things.
And it was a couple of years ago, the chicken campaign, Chicken Out, and it was extremely successful, and one of the highlights of that year at Channel 4 was seeing a front page of The Independent saying organic chicken sold out. But interestingly, if I remember right, I think there's about 125,000 people that are kind of signed up, active members of that campaign, and today we're at about 680,000 people behind this one. So, it's taken a already very successful track record in campaigning and just taking it up another level, which was really brilliant. At which juncture, it'd be good to see, we brought along a couple of clips from the show so you can get a sense of how the film and the interactive combine. So if we could look at the first clip, please.
The discards problem is the dirty secret of our European fisheries, and it's time to bring it out in the open. So I'm launching a campaign that I hope will provoke massive public indignation. With up to 20,000 tonnes of good fish being thrown back dead into the North Sea every week, the sooner we can change things, the better. It's time to start tweeting about discard. I'm not much of a Twitterer or a tweeter, as you can tell from the fact that I don't even know how I'm supposed to say it. But I'm going to tweet and Facebook and do a viral video on YouTube. I mean, it's time to get this thing out there. The overriding objective has to be to make this shameful waste of fish publicly unacceptable. And not just in the UK, I mean, this is a European phenomenon. I think there's a lot of people out there who have a sense that all is not well out there in the sea, but they really don't know what they can do about it, and they rightly think that the issues are horribly complicated, and they are. So here's a really simple one. Let's end discard. Let's stop it happening. Let's make enough noise about it, and let's direct that noise at the people who can do something about it, so that whatever they're now cooking up over in Brussels for the next phase of the common fisheries policy, the end of discard is an absolutely top priority. And the way to do that is to make politicians fear that if they don't do something about discard, they'll be voted out.
So there's a very powerful dynamic going on here. The telly makes you absolutely furious looking at this Kafkaesque situation, and the online gives people an immediate opportunity to do something about it. The other thing that's very interesting is with this documentary, it's got a very carefully structured narrative arc, and it's not a bitty thing. It's very difficult to build calls to action to do things online into it. So that clip is a really good illustration of how to, in a very organic way, get those calls to action to do stuff online. I'd like to move on now to talk a bit about how it became a cross-platform project in the first place. So, Nick, could you start?
Yeah, sure. It was the digital team at Keo worked quite closely with the television team, obviously, and the conversations within the production on the TV side, it became clear that there needed to be a petition, there needed to be a kind of call to action, and it couldn't really wait. So we had to actually create a viral, which we put out on YouTube, and create a kind of a mini site for the petition, which linked back to Hugh doing what he did in the show so eloquently. From that, we then were talking to, and had been talking to Channel 4. The way these things tend to work out is sometimes at the very last minute. I think we signed the contract on Christmas Eve. We worked right the way through Christmas, ready to get all the digital aligned for the TX, which was, I think, the 11th, 12th, 13th of Jan. So it was fun. I think some of the design elements on the site and its simplicity almost came out of that need to get stuff done quickly, get it signed off quickly and get it up. I think if we'd had a lot more time, it would perhaps look quite different. We're quite happy with how it looks and it works, so that's quite good. I think that's just about it. I don't know if Adam's got anything to add.
From the other end of the telescope, it was quite interesting, the timing, because it was a moment of quite big change at Channel 4, sort of structural change, one of the key bits of which is that all us multi-platform commissioners got plopped into the same pot as all the TV commissioners, and we all sit in a sort of genre-based way, so we kind of hang out. You know, I spend my time with the features and factual entertainment department, and so my first role on this really was there was an awful lot of activity going on all across Channel 4 around this impending programme. There was stuff going on in marketing, there was stuff going on with mobile applications and commercial stuff and multi-platform stuff that I was doing, and so one of the first things I had to do was really just to build a coherent picture which is much more in line with how we work these days. I think the sort of interaction between departments and everyone knowing what everyone else is doing is a lot stronger since the organisation's been restructured in that way. And it's quite interesting because lots of people have tried to create that integration, and there are different ways of doing it, but somehow with Channel 4 you've got 800 people. It's somehow easier to, I think, achieve that effective integration when you've got something like the BBC with 23,000 people. You really struggle to make these things work. So it really is a sort of model of getting that integration across commissioning.
I have to say, Keo's only got about 40 people in it, and we struggle in Keo to get digital and TV talking to each other. So, this has really been one of the first times where we've actually made that work.
Yeah, well, if we could actually, it'd be useful to talk a little bit about that, because obviously most of the stuff that I commission will be from a TV indie working in collaboration with a digital agency or digital indie. The companies that can actually do both sides of the equation are quite few and far between, and Keo is a relatively sort of recent entry into that pantheon of companies that can do both sides, so it's quite instructive to find out a bit about how the team working worked and the collaboration between telly and online. So if you could maybe expand a bit on that from your side.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest and the simplest thing was that we just actually sat next to each other. Previously we'd sort of sat on separate floors in different rooms, and it was just bringing the TV and digital together to actually interact and talk on a daily basis. That really, it sounds absolutely dead simple, but that was kind of key.
And to be fair, that hasn't happened until just recently, really, has it? It took us a long time to realise that that's what we should be doing, and it's only now we're doing a follow-up programme to these three, which I've just finished shooting, and it's going to go out in 6 weeks or so on Channel 4, which is a kind of what happened next after the campaign. And throughout that process, you and I have been sitting next to each other, but before then, we were a floor apart, and we used to sort of pass each other on the stairs and ask how everything was going, and that was as far as we got.
Yeah, but it is so important because, as Will says, as we've been making this fourth programme, and I think all credit to Will, he's managed to understand that by sharing information about the production process, about filming days that they're doing, about campaign events online, so through Facebook, through Twitter, actually on the website itself, we're not taking away anything from the programme, we're not giving away secrets, we're just actually building more interest, encouraging people, keeping the conversation going, so that actually they're there and they're keen and they're engaged for when we do transmit in August or whenever it might be. And I think that's been quite a big thing for us to take on and start doing, and it's been working really well.
I mean, I think that's a good point. There's something kind of quite counterintuitive about some of the online dynamics, and there's a bit of an inclination to sort of keep all the secrets of the telly sort of thing. But actually, you know, there's a wealth of experience for everything from Skins to Alone in the Wild across all different genres that shows very clearly that you can afford to be open and share stuff, and in some ways expose the narrative before the transmission of the programme without any detrimental effect, in fact, on the contrary. I think also it's interesting, my experience would also bear out the fact that just this simple thing of being in close proximity, and you're just improving your chances of good stuff happening and creative connections happening. So, for example, one of the other things that I've commissioned is Embarrassing Bodies, and that's become a very iterative editorial process between TV and online, purely by virtue of the fact that the TV team and the online team are sitting in the same room, and you can be really opportunistic. So sometimes, you know, for example, the TV team will come back and something that they planned didn't work and they've got a hole in the programme, and the online team will come along and say, actually, we've got this that might fill it really nicely, and that's how that kind of interaction starts. That's a bit about the kind of internal teams. It'd be interesting just to hear from Nick briefly a bit about how Keo worked with the other indies involved in this season, because of course on one level that's ostensibly a competitive relationship, and yet in this case there was a really high degree of collaboration.
Yeah, sure. So just to recap, all of the other chefs, a lot of them have got their own production companies. We needed to work with them to get their content, as the slide shows. So we had various bits of content from their shows, we were promoting their shows, we were linking with their fan bases. We had publicity shots, we wanted to put their footage up on YouTube. We needed to think about credits, presentation rights. There are a whole load of rights from those companies that we needed to secure for what we were doing. So there needed to be some help from Channel 4, which there was, on brokering those relationships. When those other indies got their heads around what we were trying to do, and the fact that it wasn't competitive and it was complementary, then they were very happy to kind of play ball. It was quite complex. It did take quite a lot of time trying to reach people who were on holiday at Christmas and that kind of thing. It's just fun and games, really. I think the other thing to mention is some of those other presenters obviously have relationships with supermarkets. They were very nervous about what Hugh was going to say about some of those. So we had to, you know, just talk to them and make them feel comfortable. And I think they've been very happy with the results.
And just logistically as well, because getting video, I mean, the indies were great and were very helpful, but just logistically, they were cutting their programmes right up until the end of the wire, so right up until transmission pretty much. So getting stuff from them to go onto the website to launch prior to transmission, just even the physical act of doing that was quite hard. We've actually got, I think, we had clips from Heston, which were still with guide VO on, so the producer's voice rather than Heston, so it wasn't the finished article, but you know, we had to sort of work with those sorts of things, but in the end it all sort of came together.
And we saw in that initial reel Jamie taking part in Hugh's programme, which is something that you don't see often. In fact, I can't really think of hardly any examples at all. So it'd be interesting to hear from Will a bit about that actual on-screen collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, Jamie was also involved in the chicken campaign, so Hugh and Jamie have worked together a little bit before and sort of share a similar ethos. But we obviously felt that if we had Jamie on board, it would give us a big sort of boost of credibility. And he was good enough to come down to that day we had outside Westminster and help us out during a filming day, which improved that sequence no end. And then we did a throw forward at the end of our series saying, if you want to know more about how to what fish you should be buying and how to cook them, then watch Jamie's programmes. And he did 10 3-minute little fishy recipe sustainability programmes, which kind of complemented ours, because that was something, once we'd gone down the political route, we didn't then dwell too long on what fish you should be eating and how you should cook it. So we sort of left all that to Jamie and tried to join the two things up so that the campaign felt holistic and planned, which maybe it was and maybe it wasn't, but it gave that impression anyway, I think, in the end.
And what could have been done better in retrospect in terms of that collaboration between the different indies across the season?
Without a doubt, we should have all got together much earlier than we did. We should have probably all got together at Channel 4, to be honest, and decided who was going to do what from the beginning, because for a long time during the pre-production, and even while we were in production, everyone was sort of not really talking to each other, because we are all rival companies, and there's a sort of, everyone likes to keep their contacts to themselves and keep their ideas to themselves. And so we were sort of, our researchers were stumbling over each other. And I had a researcher called Callum, and Jamie Oliver's team had a researcher called Callum, and both Callums were ringing up the same fisheries people in the UK and asking different, and everyone was getting very confused, and it was all a nightmare. Which we managed to sort it all out, but we should, if we were doing it all again, we'd try and sort it all out a whole lot earlier than we did.
Right. I'd like to move on now to development in the interactive sense rather than the telly sense. It being one of the sort of multi-platform words that that causes confusion between the two sides. And I think just pick up on something that Nick said a bit earlier on about the design of the site. Can you put up the homepage for a sec, Joe, if you've got it? No. But it's got a very sort of particular approach to design. Initially because it was done quickly, but then sort of deliberately sort of carried on across the whole campaign. Nick, maybe that's something you could talk a little bit about.
Yes.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, from my point of view, what was really the reason I really liked the design approach is something that's kind of important across the board, but it's got a real kind of authenticity about it. Looks like a campaigning site, doesn't particularly look like a big old broadcaster site doing, you know, coming in with its big boots on to do good in the world or try to do good in the world for a couple of weeks and then move on to something else. So it's got a particular kind of vibe about it, and it's actually a vibe that carries on into the programme itself, because there's an authenticity about it.
Yeah, and in fact, I think you know, fisheries management is a horribly complicated, difficult subject for people to get their heads around. And actually, you know, what we were doing in the TV programme was making it all about this one simple issue that everyone can get their heads around. Let's stop throwing away good fish. It's a waste, and nobody likes waste. And I think that's why we ended up with just this very simple call to action. It's just like sign up, see the counter go up. You just have to do one thing. You don't have to understand why it's like this or the complexities or any of that stuff. It's just a very simple messaging. Of course, hidden behind the website is more information for people who want to go further and find out more, and the solutions and all these kind of things. But you know, the messaging is very straightforward and simple, and that, as Nick said earlier, was really borne out because we did it all in 3 days in a rush. But we liked it and we've stuck with it.
And you're talking a bit about the complexity of the subject matter there. How did you manage to properly get under the skin of what the issues were, who was active in it?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, we met with a whole bunch of NGOs who became very, very useful to us because they obviously understood all the issues much better than we did. And they all became a supporting partner. So on the Real homepage, they've all got their logos down on the bottom, and you can click through, oh, there we go, and you can click through from each one of those to find out more about them. And to be honest, this sounds like they've all been running their own campaigns on different levels, but they've never really had the reach or the impact that we had because we were on telly and we had a celebrity chef backing us. And so it's been good for them to be able to, I know that MCS, for example, have, I think, 6,000 friends on Facebook. We've got 250,000 friends on Facebook. So being able to link up with them has meant a lot more people now are aware of MCS and go to their website, and it's been good for them. WWF have got their own campaign, and more people are aware of that but they're finding them through us. So they helped us and we helped them, which has worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really, you know, that's why I do what I do. The interface between features, sort of populist, very mainstream telly, and interactive network media, when you hit the sweet spot there, it has, you have a real chance to make a big difference. Do you want to talk a little bit about Emma, actually, in terms of expertise?
I can talk about Emma. The thing that's been mentioned a couple of times in terms of utilising some of these NGOs and the experiences they have, because they're the experts and they've been working in this area for a long time. And the design of the site in terms of its authenticity means that what we do needs to have that credibility, and we need to gain that knowledge. So for the digital team, we had someone who's a PhD on fisheries policies, and they're in the office and we could utilise them for lots of things. I know that the TV department also had access to people through the NGOs. So I think getting the right knowledge, utilising the right people, and making the whole thing authentic is really, really important.
But on that as well, I think, of course, we have to be credible, and we are, and we've been shown to be, but also what's important is then not getting caught up in the complications or the complexities of the subject. And being brutally honest, I knew nothing really about fish or fisheries policy, and in a sense that was quite beneficial because I could be the voice of the people, the laymen. If I didn't really get it, if it was too complicated for me, then other people wouldn't. And so I worked closely with our expert Emma, who Nick mentioned, to make sure that, you know, it was a clear message and it was easily understood, which I think was the same for the TV programme really as well.
We're trying to crack through a lot of material, so I hope you'll bear with us on that, because I'd like to get plenty of sort of takeaways for you in terms of multi-platform campaigning, but there will be at least 15 minutes at the end to pick up anything in Q&As. So we've heard a bit about what went well in the development. Want to pick up on a couple of the sort of trickier things during the development period in the run-up to broadcast. Nick, do you want to just say a couple of things about indie rights, working with the other indies?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of mentioned it before. It's fairly complex. There are lots of different relationships and lots of different rights positions between the indies, ourselves, and Channel 4, in fact. So those kind of things always take a long time, and we didn't have a lot of time. So, you know, that's just life, I suppose. But there's not a lot else we could have done differently, but it's just one of those things.
Luckily in Nick we had an ex-pact person, so no better man to get those things tied up. The other thing that was quite tricky, which has been mentioned already, but the timing, and it's actually a sort of perennial problem, but January is a big kind of launch time in the TV calendar, and you quite often end up with something like, in this case, it launches January the 11th. It means that you're working over a really difficult period, and there's kind of loads of buses coming along at the same time. So in this particular instance, on my plate I had One Born at Christmas, which was a live show all over Christmas. I had the next series of One Born Every Minute. I had this all going out within a few days of each other. Quite nightmarish, but also nightmarish at the indie end as well. Do you want to talk a bit about the nightmare of Christmas?
Christmas is always a nightmare. Everyone wants to go home, but I was still editing on Christmas Eve, I think. You know, there was a lot to get our head around, and from a TV point of view, it's your job is to be focused on the television production. As I said before, you know, digital wasn't my world. I didn't really understand what was going on, or to be honest, what the effect could be. I think in the real world once the programmes transmitted. So I was very focused on what I was doing, and Jo was struggling to get any attention from me at all as I was sitting in an edit suite. So she was having to shout louder and louder. Which
I never shout.
It's the other way around.
So I'll move us into the sort of broadcast period. If we could have a look at the second video clip, please.
But my viral is certainly attracting attention among the delegates.
I have seen the movie, and I see a lot of good fish going overboard. And
Would you like to see discard eliminated completely?
yeah,
Discarding damages the industry's reputation. I think it's a waste of a resource.
And will you sign up to our fish fight campaign on that basis?
Absolutely.
Do you think a discard ban should be part of the reformed CFP?
Absolutely. I think it should be banned.
Can we see a bit of Scottish Government support for the fish fight campaign?
I think so.
Great. Sign up. Hey, how about that? 15,259 sign-ups. Finally, we're getting the public seriously exercised about the whole business of CFP reform because of this one issue, discard, which is an issue they completely understand. How about that? Another 22 in the 30 seconds or so that I've been wittering on to you. That's pretty good, eh? That's pretty good.
So we talked a little bit earlier about this, the way that the sort of calls to action and the digital dimension was integrated into the film, and that's well illustrated by both those clips, really. But I'd like to sort of pursue that a little bit more and just talk a bit about the way that the online was integrated with the TV. Can you give your perspective on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, there wasn't any great master plan. We hadn't sort of figured this all out before we started, but we just sort of followed our instinct, really, which was that we were going to launch a campaign, and that was our story, so we might as well film the campaign in action. So we took the viral out to Brussels, and we got those people to sign up, and then we got Jamie Oliver to sign up, and that all felt very sort of like just what we should be doing. But once that program, that was from program 3, that was the final program, once that program transmitted, I think everybody sitting at home who increasingly are sitting there with their iPads or their iPhones or online at the same time, saw all these credible people agreeing with the campaign, agreeing to join it. They saw Jamie Oliver saying that he was going to sign up, and it just pushed everybody to get online and to sign up during the hour of that transmission. And I think we had an enormous spike. I don't know what the figures are exactly, but
yeah, I think it's really interesting. When we are watching that live, we have some tools that are fairly common that allow you to watch the back end of the site and where people are coming from, what pages they're landing on, and what the live stats are. And you could literally just see it jump when that kind of thing was shown, especially on program 3. Huge.
And we were all sitting there in the pub watching it. I was with Hugh.
You were?
I was in the pub. Yeah, you were at home working somewhere. But we were all pressing refresh on our phones, and every time we pressed refresh, it was going up by another 30,000 people, literally every 10 seconds. The numbers were just going bananas, and it was very exciting for us.
Yeah.
From a TV point of view, I'd never seen that happen in real time before.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, social media was a big part of it during transmission. We were online throughout all 3 programs, and actually throughout the entire season I was online because as we said before, I was sort of managing it all for the big fish fight season as a sense as well. And some of the other programmes were extremely useful to us. The Sunday, I think after we transmitted, we finished on the Thursday, was Gordon Ramsay's programme, and that also had a massive knock-on effect to our site, didn't it? Really pushed up the figures again. But yes, just the viral effect that Will talks about was really exciting. These numbers were just going up and up and up. It was crazy. And then people jumping on board. Big names, Stephen Fry, you know, who everyone knows has got however many million people following him on Twitter. People like Coldplay have also got huge numbers. Richard Branson, all of these people tweeting about it. It just was an incredible few days.
And there's obviously sort of, you know, there's a massive advantage to bringing in people from different realms. So, for example, to get a band like Coldplay behind the campaign just brings in a whole other fan base that you normally wouldn't reach. So it's a very powerful aspect of it. I think another thing that's interesting, this time last year, I was doing much the same kind of session here with 7 days, and we saw some of the same sort of science at work really in terms of what gets people online. I mean, Joe was involved in that project as well. But with 7 days, it wasn't plastering, go to channel4.com/7 days that got people moving. It was actually seeing people online with their laptops out, interacting, that made people realise exactly how the show worked. And when they could see it online, they went and did it. And likewise, you know, watching Hugh sort of tweeting away there or sitting at his laptop, it's that kind of thing that actually drives the real engagement.
And there were a few compliance issues. We weren't allowed to, I wanted to have a crawler going on the bottom of the screen saying go to fishfight.net, and for Ofcom reasons you're not allowed to do that, I think. It has to go via Channel 4, doesn't it? So
yeah, I mean, especially with something that's as political as this, you know, where you can draw the line is quite tricky as a public service broadcaster. So in this particular case, because there was this political with a capital P campaign going on, it needed to be a little bit at arm's length from the core of Channel 4. But
we found ways around that by shooting the URL on Hugh's viral screen, and we wrote it on every banner, and we just, it was in the background of as many shots as we could possibly put it in.
Which was really effective, because you know, the journey for most people is either direct to the URL, which was fishfight.net, nice easy one to remember, or via Google. So you know, even though it was slightly kind of less than 100% explicit, got people there, no problem.
I think, yeah, that's something that I think is just so crucial for any of these sorts of things, that it shouldn't just be a call to action at the end of the programme, you know, a board that comes up or a pub anno or something like that. If it's integrated throughout the editorial, throughout the entire programme, in subtle ways, or in blatant ways, it's just so effective, and I think that's really, really crucial.
Now, Nick, you mentioned the spike of traffic. Can you talk a bit about that? Because that's always a perennial challenge with when interactive meets TV.
I think I'm happy to go through some of the results, and you've seen some of them, but in terms of managing those kind of evenings, we had about 6 or 7 people working to manage on the online side. So we had people looking after the server, people looking after all the social sites, Twitter, Facebook, and then monitoring all of that in live real time. So if anything did happen, then you know, if anyone said something rather nasty about Jamie or Hugh, we'd be able to react, or if any of the sites came down, we could. So all of that is very exciting when it works and when it really flies. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And a lot of experience, which we luckily have within our team. But it's one of the challenges. If you've got that much traffic and that much incoming, we had literally tens of thousands of emails of people emailing saying, we'll support you, or they had a question about this. And when you're managing something like this in real time, you just have to work out ways of managing responses and that kind of thing. So it's tricky, but we learned a lot.
And we had 500,000 sign-ups in 6 days, didn't we? I think that was the sort of big kind of push.
So that is a perennial problem, that really weird internet dynamic that you see around TV, where you suddenly get this kind of absolute stampede online. I mean, I think the most extreme one that I've had in recent times was an embarrassing bodies one, where we ran a test to do with the autism spectrum, and we had 30,000 people go online within the space of 22 seconds. And just technically, that sort of thing is extremely difficult to deal with. And pretty much every commission, I always start off by reminding people that that needs serious attention, and to do their maths properly, and to make sure that they can cope with that kind of traffic. It's a weird thing peculiar to television. One last thing in terms of the broadcast period, Nick, could you tell us a bit about, I think in terms of indicating where things are going, can you tell us a bit about mobile access to the site?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So on our stats, people were viewing the website and signing the petition through their phones, through a browser on their phones. That worked out about an average of 15% of all the online views were through a mobile. And of that mobile usage, it was nearly 70% were through Apple devices, so iPads and iPhones. So very high, and kind of has implications on, apps or HTML5 apps or all of those kind of things. So it's interesting.
I mean, I've been doing this multi-platform, cross-platform, transmedia, whatever this week's word for it is, for quite some time. And one of the things that's most inspiring, really, is how pixels can translate to stuff in the real world. So, I mean, this session's called Multi-Platform Campaigning with Real Impact. So I want to have a quick look now at that real impact and what it's done in the real world. Who wants to take up that baton?
Shall I just run through the stats, and then they will kind of lead to the impact? So we have just over the kind of TX period, we had 1.5 million people visit the site, 4.5 million page views. On the Thursday evening, we had 1 million page views just over an hour, which was nail-biting, and the site did slow down slightly. The people that we used for our kind of live analytics, their site crashed and it brought down 8,000 of their clients. So we had a nasty email from them the next day, but our site stayed up. I think Channel 4's site slowed. So it was an exciting time. Most people, I think there were 3.5 page requests per person, 3.5 minutes per person. So some interesting stats, 2.5 million likes, Facebook likes as well over that TX period. So in terms of where we are now, we've got 220,000 people on Facebook, 22,000 people on Twitter, and 680,000 people who signed the campaign. So very successful from a digital multi-platform point of view.
Should we look a bit at political impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, I've made lots of TV programs before, but normally, obviously, when you make a TV program, transmission feels like the end of something. You book your holiday a week afterwards and come back and then try and find the next project that you're going to go and work on. Whereas this time was the first time really where I've made something and transmission has felt like the beginning of something, and that's been really exciting because what we've done is really changing things in the real world, or it seems to be. So. One of the things that we designed with Joe and an NGO called Client Earth was a thing called an early day motion toolkit, where people around the country could very easily find out who their MP was and email their MP. We had a standard letter that they could send off. And Zach Goldsmith put forward an early day motion to the House of Commons saying this House supports fish fight. And I think we've got 250 different MPs signed up, which it became the most, or the second most signed early day motion of this parliamentary session, which was enough to trigger a debate in the House of Commons here in the UK. So we had a 4-hour debate a couple of weeks ago where the motion was unanimously passed that this House supports fish fight and says that there should be an end to discards. That's obviously resonated in Europe. So Maria Damanaki, who the petition was addressed to, is now on the phone to us every other day, asking what we're doing next, how she can help. She really wants to see an end to this as well, and she's using us as a way of beating down the politicians in Europe who maybe don't want to support her and her changes to the fisheries policy. So she has terrible trouble with the Spanish and the Italians and the Portuguese, who are very resistant to fisheries change. So she's encouraging us to try and translate these pages into foreign languages, to move it into Spain, to move it into Portugal, and push it out there, and use the power that we've got to actually help her to get through the change that she wants.
So fishfight.net has just launched in the last few weeks in, I think it's 9 other languages.
11.
Oh, 11 languages. You know, the campaign goes on, and we'll pick up a bit about that shortly. What would also be good to talk about a bit is impact on sort of industry and supermarkets in particular.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about it, but there's a secondary story in the show which is about tuna and tuna labelling and how tuna is caught and sold to the UK. And there's 2 ways of doing it really, either by using bloody big boats who use things called fish aggregation devices which attract lots of tuna, but they also attract lots of sharks and turtles. And obviously if you use big nets around these fish aggregation devices, you inevitably get lots of bycatch of these big charismatic species. So we took Tesco's to task for selling tuna like that, and Tesco's folded just on the day of transmission, and we were able to include that in the final programme with some very late voiceover. And they've now committed to only selling pole and line caught tuna, which is the more sustainable tuna, by the end of 2013, I think. Once Tesco's went, then we put the pressure on Prince's. Prince's folded, Morrison's have gone, Co-op has gone, Asda's changed. So the tuna landscape now for the British supermarkets is completely different since these programmes. And we did some of that while we were making the programmes, but the rest of it's happened since transmission and online, with Joe working with Greenpeace, asking our 600,000 supporters to email the managing director of Prince's Tuna and send them a message and say, you know, we think you should change your tuna sourcing policies. And because they're frightened of the publicity that we've got on the TV, and they feel, I think Prince's had 50,000 emails, I think, in a week from our supporters saying they wanted to change. And you know, I think that's really exciting. It's kind of people power in action. It's proving that, you know, if enough people get behind something and say things, you can really change things in the real world. And it's
I mean, a campaign just marches on, and it marches on online, possibly with another TV programme, but I think it would be doing that in its own right anyway. And I'm communicating on a daily basis via social networks with these 200,000 people through Facebook and Twitter, but also, when we choose to, asking our database of 600,000 people to email or take action and do something. And it is really great to see that happen. You know, we do make real change and real impact, and that has been exciting.
I mean, I think it's, I think we saw a tiny clip of it before, but it's really interesting to see a European commissioner citing back the numbers from a Channel 4 website as part of their reaction to the issue. So it's really powerful to see that cycled back. And in fact, it was within sort of under 4 weeks that there started to be little pronouncements coming through where it was very evident that they were watching what was going on the site.
And we didn't mention actually that, just as a general thing as well, there was lots of press in the month after, I suppose, the programme went out, which is that people were changing their eating habits as well. So I think the grocer reported that, you know, sales of sustainable fish have soared, and people were choosing all these different types of fish that they perhaps hadn't before, when typically they just choose cod or tuna or salmon. So that was a real world impact, people's lives being changed, which was great.
Well, it was the Grocer, the Sun and the Guardian, so hit all bases there really. So that's a bit about the results. It would be good to move on just very briefly to look at post-TX and to talk a little bit about the sort of life cycle of the project and the dynamics over time. So that's maybe one for you, Joe, just to talk about.
Yeah, I guess it's just what I've just been saying. It's just a daily thing. It keeps on going. It hasn't stopped. Sometimes you wonder when it ever will. But we have, actually, it's quite a key thing to think about as well in the initial commission of these things is your exit strategy. When will this happen? When will this end? And one of the things we decided right from the off was that at some point, and this date has now changed, but at some point we would be handing over our database to MCS and Client Earth, who are two of our key NGOs.
That's the Marine
Conservation
Society.
To look after, and that came from Chicken Out.
Yeah, we did that with Chicken Out. So we're a business that wants to create change and run big campaigns, but we don't want to run those forever, and I think there are better people to take those things on. So with Chicken Out, we handed that across to Compassion in World Farming, who continue to run it, do run it now, and they do a great job. So we're still kind of partners, but they look after it and they run those campaigns. So it's very clear to us that on this one we needed to come up with something similar. So as Joe said, that's what we've got in place.
But we have lengthened or increased the amount of time that we are still continuing this campaign. I think initially we thought that about now, or at least in the autumn, we'd be handing over this database, but the programme, the campaign has taken on this life of its own, and I think we all feel a responsibility to the process, to the people, to the NGOs, to everyone who's got behind us, to not stop, to not just go, right, well, that's the TV done, see you later, but to keep on pushing. And the Common Fisheries Policy reform process goes on for another 18 months, and as such, we will, I think, be heavily involved for that time.
And that's a sort of really interesting point, because sort of thinking beyond the short term isn't a strength of television, or hasn't been to date. But when you get into a multi-platform world, it's not about overnights, it's not even about 7 or 30 days of video on demand. If you're going to undertake something like this, I mean, Joe hit the nail on the head there, you've got a certain sort of responsibility, so you can't sort of just start a service or start a campaign and just let it fall off a cliff at some point when you move on to the next thing. So one of the things in commissioning such things, I always ask up front for a picture of how people see the life cycle of the project. So as has been mentioned here, you know, exit is really important. You know, finding a way to exit but to leave a legacy and to really kind of realise the investment on online well. But actually it's just as important to look at the other end of the project and actually think, well, you know, how are people going to hear about this thing? Because the internet's a noisy old world, how are they going to hear about it if stuff starts before broadcast? How are they going to sort of get there? Once they get there, what are they going to do? Why are they going to come back? All these aspects of the life cycle are really important to think through at the beginning, to have a real concrete plan of what you think the life cycle will be, even if that changes over time, because again, you've also heard that you need a sort of degree of flexibility as well, because not everything turns out how you think it is. And you know, there's a clear feeling that now is not quite the right time to hand over the site for this beginning of this exit. There's too much energy going, and the television's still an important part of it, with a follow-up show coming in the beginning of August, end of July?
Yeah, end of August, beginning of July, whenever I get a chance to finish it. But and also, you know, we've been attracting a lot of interest now from Europe, and you know, from a TV point of view, we're hoping that we're going to make shows in German and in French and in Spanish and in Polish for those broadcasters in those countries. And that's all obviously as a result of the impact that they've seen, and you know, how this works, and just spreading the campaign as far and wide as we can.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, there's now 11 sites in Europe. Quite basic sites initially in a sort of first iteration, but we'll definitely be pushing those more, particularly in 4 countries, we think, as we go forward over the next 18 months, and actually hiring on-the-ground producers in those places who are native speakers. Unfortunately, I don't speak 11 languages, so that might be tricky. So we need them to sort of be there to do the social media and just run the sites, sort of as I do in the UK, really.
Which sort of brings us neatly, really, to reflect a little bit about what's worked for both the indie Keo and for Channel 4 in the longer term. Who would like to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly what's worked for me is joining up 2 separate parts of the office for the first time successfully. And I think if I had, well, I was going to say if I had my time again, I will have my time again. From now on, I will make sure that I talk to Joe a lot earlier than previously, and that we try and you know, join forces and work out a plan a bit better what we're going to do and how these two things are going to work together. But I think from Keo's point of view, it's been great to actually bring two sides of the same company together, and we're now, you know, we understand each other a lot better, I think. It's a beautiful
Will has
marriage.
a Facebook page now.
I have a Facebook page. I have 6 friends on Facebook. So.
Nick, do you want to give your perspective on what's...
Yeah, I think kind of reiterating what Will said, you can talk about kind of multi-platform thinking and idea creation, but sometimes you've just got to get on and do it, and this kind of project within Keo has proved that and has made people work together, and it's been successful, so that bodes well for the future. I think there's a few things that we've learned. Obviously, we were always going to run the campaign online between the 3 programs and the 4th catch-up program, so there was always going to be a period of time where we'd have to engage the audience who'd signed up and do some interesting things online, which we have done and we are doing, but because of the size and nature and scale of our audience, we've had to increase what we're going to do, how often we do it. So Joe's been working really hard on making certain people who are popular on Facebook kind of fans and getting them to help moderate stuff, and we're putting weekly kind of calls to action out, been running quizzes, getting them to send letters to their MPs. There's a whole kind of schedule of things that we're doing to keep that audience engaged for the next programme and beyond into Europe. So, and that's a big task when you've got hundreds of thousands of people there, and they, you know, they squabble and they fight, and some of them are a bit mad, but you know, that's life.
From a commissioning point of view, what I actually commissioned with this was actually to provide resources for the campaign right through to September this year. So again, that gives you a sense of the difference between telly and online, just in the sense of the sort of timescale there. You've got to sort of show a commitment for at least the sort of medium term, and also to sort of stay flexible and try and help that exit happen effectively, and try and support the initiative in the longer run. So, for example, we did a couple of years ago a thing called Landshare, which was another thing with Hugh. It was to do with connecting people who want to grow their own food with people that've got bits of land they're willing to share. And in that case, it was a 1-year commission to get the whole thing up and running, and then it was a question of trying to support that project through to some further funding. So we got through our Director of Nations and Regions another couple of years of funding just to help it into a sort of sustainable position. But that issue of sustainability is really important when you're doing this kind of campaign with this kind of real-world impact. It would be also, I mean, in terms of what worked from the indie point of view, you've managed to leverage some extra funding, haven't you, off the back of the online?
Yeah, we've got, there are some rather weird and secretive and strange philanthropic organisations in different corners of Europe who've approached us and are giving us money to help with all these translations of the websites and to roll out the campaign across Europe. They're obviously people who are concerned about environmental issues and particularly marine conservation. And they're funding us to do the rollout of the campaign and also to sort of develop the TV programs in those 4 countries that we talked about. So that's been very, we weren't expecting that at all, but it's been great.
So to sort of wrap things up from up front here, I'd just like to go from one end to the other and just get people's sort of lessons learned, really, the main sort of thing that they've got to take away from the experience of doing this project. So should we start from your end, Nick?
Yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of people talk about it, but you've got to think about, and what I've learned is that you've got to think about lots of different sorts of content to engage lots of different users. So there are lots of people that are quite happy to come and like a page or sign a petition. Other people want deeper levels of engagement and richer content. And so you've got to just think about all those different ways of engaging people, and also all the different ways that they come to you as well. And I suppose the thing that we do at Keo, both in the digital division and in the TV and film division, is only do projects that we kind of believe in, and I hope that they look authentic for that reason. We're probably never going to do a big gambling site, although we might one day. I shouldn't have said that, but yeah, so be authentic, I suppose, and have passion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point that Nick made there as well, about the fact that when you're doing these things, you've got to cater for quite a spectrum, from the highly engaged user right through to pretty passive users, and there's got to be something there for all of them. If it only works for a hardcore of people that are really into it and maybe already converts, it's not really going to have anything like this kind of impact. You've really got to be able to draw people in, including the more passive, tentative types, and maybe sort of escalate them up to take a more active role in it when they can see how easy it is to start making it a personal impact. Jo, what's your takeaway?
I guess from a social media perspective, one of the important things I think is just to utilise what's out there. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Facebook, Twitter are doing everything for us fantastically well. And I think it's safe to say that the majority of our ongoing campaigning happens on those sites. The website itself is a key part of that, but you don't need to build a great big forum as part of a site anymore. I think it's important just to use what you've got, really. I think that's...
So the centre of gravity is really moved from the microsite across to the Facebook site. That's where the day-to-day stuff is going on. I think, picking up from my point of view, this was a real experiment, because just making a decision to try and run a campaign out of Facebook, rather than, as Jo said, I wasn't keen to build a big microsite full of stuff. That's the kind of first for Channel 4 to run a campaign in that way, straight off the social media. And it means you've got quite a complex network of presences, because there was a kind of a clearing page on channel4.com, and for regulatory reasons we largely have to point people towards channel4.com. And in a way, it was a clearing page in the sense that some people just wanted to know about how to cook fish, or where they can buy it and stuff, so they'd go off and follow the sort of foodie route. And some people wanted to get really active, and they'd head straight over either to the campaign hub on Facebook or straight to fishfight.net. But as has been mentioned, you know, there were 4 or 5 different social media presences. There was the microsite, there was channel4.com. All of it needed to be linked up so that it was easy for people to move around and find the sort of approach that they wanted to take. So that was very interesting, and I think, you know, the other thing that really sort of was very important as a takeaway for me is just maintaining that authenticity. There's a lot that you see on television, and there's a lot that you see online that feels manufactured, and it means that, you know, going forward, Channel 4 needs to be very careful about just what it calls a campaign and how often it does it. I think Fish Fight will be such a large thing on the landscape going forward that we just need to be very careful that it doesn't feel like we're doing you know, a campaign every week. So it's really got to be done judiciously. Will, what's your learning?
Well, my learning is I think that, you know, TV can change things in the real world, which is, you know, something that I didn't really, until you do it, you can't quite believe it. So I'd certainly think that we should all be thinking of more ways to do that, to use TV to change things for the better. And if you are going to do that, talk to digital early rather than late.
And that actually applies at the commissioning end as well. It works a lot better if you flag something up as intended for multi-platform from a very early point. It means you've got a lot more options and a lot more chance of making a success of it. So you just want to be talking multi-platform from the off, and that means even pre-commission, certainly pre-development. So that brings us to, we've got 16 minutes left. So that's all 16 minutes for you guys to just ask anything you want to about any of this stuff or anything related. So, yes, and also we're just going to stick up online. Actually, maybe Joe, can you give it, or Will, context for what we're looking at here?
Well, part of what happened in Programme 4 is Selfridges, as some of you may know, in Oxford Street are running a big fish conservation awareness thing at the moment, and they gave us a window on Selfridges on Oxford Street. So what you're seeing here is what we've put in the window of Oxford Street. That's live. It's exactly the same as what would be happening in Oxford Street now. You can text your name to the Selfridges window, or in fact to this screen, and sign up to the petition. And if you do that, you will get a funny message from Hugh, which is exciting. So anybody who hasn't signed the petition but feels that they want to, text, there you go, text fish and your full name to 78866, do it now, and something cool will happen.
Yeah, so there you go, interact away while we're doing Q&A. So some questions. Yes, that gentleman there, have we got microphones? Yes, lovely. In the check shirt, yeah.
Hi, John McFarlane from SBS. I'm just wondering about the nature of the kind of ownership of the fish fight site. Because it sounds like this is the landing page on Channel 4.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Keo you've just given them like your blessing, run the campaign, and as long as...
Well, we give them a blessing and our money as well, yeah. But not taking the rights in it.
So, but in terms of that communication with
the
public, because I just find with SBS the marketing people, when it starts to get into social networks, really want to kind of have a say. I'm just wondering how Channel 4 and Keo communicate around this stuff, or if you don't.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's quite sort of thoroughly planned, and also, I mean, from the Channel 4 perspective, I think it's really important to understand what you're doing in terms of social media, because across the organisation it's used in a lot of different ways. Sometimes you're in listening mode, quite often you're in speaking mode, occasionally you're in listening and speaking mode, and you need a real kind of clear context for what you're doing and why, and to have it sort of thoroughly planned out. So that's all kind of built into the commission, really. Exactly, why we're using the social media and very specifically how we're doing it. Yeah.
Thank you, Gavin Humphreys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Adam and Ali, who's actually the sort of social media person at the channel, I spoke to Ali quite a lot at the beginning. We had an escalation process so that if there were problems, we could talk to her about how we remove things. And I think because we've worked together before, and Keo, I think, are trusted, we sort of are able to go off and do our merry thing, having established that the channel are happy with us.
Yeah. Does that answer your question properly?
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Good, yeah, cheers. This lady in the front here. Sorry, can we just get the mic, because I think they're recording it, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Marin. I cover documentaries for About.com. First of all, congratulations on this. I think it's a very worthwhile fight. It's something I knew nothing about, and obviously you're having a tremendous amount of success with it, and that is terrific. I think there are a lot of documentary films and a lot of documentary-based issue-based documentaries that will benefit from knowing what you've done. I'm concerned about something, though. And that is particularly, and I give you for example, I mean, Sarah Palin now in the United States is coming up with a documentary. And I don't support Sarah Palin as I support this fish fight. So I'm concerned about how you inform audiences about I don't like to use this word, but it is, in fact, propaganda aspect of what it is that you're doing, and how one differentiates between propaganda and authenticity when you're dealing with a campaign-oriented presentation of reality in documentary form. And I'm sorry, I know it's a complex issue, but I'm very concerned about it.
Do you want to?
Well, I mean, I would hope that people watching the, you know, we're not forcing anyone to join the petition. It's up to people to watch the TV shows and make up their own minds. And if you watch this show and you agree with the issue and you like what he's saying, then sign up. If you watch Sarah Palin's and you don't, then no one's forcing you to, so don't. So I think there's enough information, certainly in the TV shows, and I hope there is also on the website, for you to be able to make your own opinions about whether you want to join the campaigns or not.
I think what's quite interesting about it as well is it doesn't, it's very explicit in saying we're not promoting any particular solution. Yeah. We appreciate that it's a very complex issue, but as we saw in the clip there, as a sort of starting point, let's just all acknowledge that fish discards is mad and wrong. And that's really the sort of, you know, that's a pretty solid starting place. And in fact, it's with the follow-up programme and the content that will go with that we'll start to see a bit more detail about what some of the solutions are and how it's likely to play out over the next year in Europe.
And we were very clear that we didn't want to become just another NGO banging a drum, saying, you know, we joined the ranks of everyone else there. We were just saying we are a media company. What we're doing is pointing the spotlight at something, and we're educating and informing people about something which happens far out at sea and no one knows about. So that's all we've done is given it the oxygen of publicity. And it's sort of up to the politicians and the NGOs and the decision makers and the public at large to decide what to do with that now. I think that's what we feel.
When you take a film, for example, like The Code, which brought, really, I mean, it's related in some way, and it brought a tremendous amount of focus on a particular issue. How would you have expanded that socially?
Well, petitions are an obvious way of doing things, I think, and petitions are, you know, a simple and easy way to do it. So if you wanted to start a, you know, anti-dolphin slaughter petition, then I'm sure they could have done that. But whether they would have been able to integrate it into the film or not, I doubt, because the film was so much about them trying to get that footage. And maybe, you know, they could have made the story, we're trying to get this footage to make it viral, to put on the website to accompany our petition, and that may have been, you know, that's sort of similar to what we've done in a way. It's just taking it that next stage.
But having said that, I see a lot of proposals that include petitions in them, and I have to just ask, well, who are you petitioning? Who are you going to deliver this to? And there's quite often there's not really an answer to that. So if you are going down the petition route, you really need a clear route map ahead of you, so that it's got a sort of you know, it's got a proper role in bringing about some useful change. Mike.
Yeah, Nick was talking about, big pardon, not that I really knew one, but Nick was talking about the extent to which a lot of it was last minute and it was really rushed and all the rest of it. But what strikes you watching it, and what seems to give it its power, is the degree to which the editorial includes and integrates with the social media, so that you're constantly doing the calls to action. And I was just wondering where and how that impetus began, because what strikes you in comparison with a lot of other things is how integrated all platforms are with this, and that seems to have given it so much of its force.
Yeah, I mean, I think we chose those clips deliberately. The whole film, the whole series is not, you know, one kind of massive call to action, but we did integrate them. I suppose what we're talking about when we did it in a rush is that I didn't give Nick very much notice. I basically said, I'm going to Brussels next week and we want to launch the viral there, you know, and I'd already got my editor. We shot this stuff, all this underwater stuff of dead fish going past the lens. We'd shot very early on, so I'd already asked my editor to make a 1-minute viral out of that, which we had, and then it was a question of giving it to Nick and saying, build us something around this, but do it quickly because we're going on Thursday.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
There is something else, there's some technical things that we did to link up the various websites, the social media hubs. We use some kind of flash-based things that Will likes to drop. They're called sprouts, which he's very keen on, which allows you to create a quiz on a website and then put that quiz on Facebook at the same time. So it links all these various things. That worked really well. And the other thing that I didn't mention before was that we had quite a lot of people who said, my family or my school or the people I know haven't got access to email, for example. So we've got downloadable petitions and we've got downloadable packs about the campaign, which one person can download then share with their friends. So we were getting kind of envelopes full of signatures as well at the same time. So It's not just about the kind of cutting edge social media stuff.
And to give you a sort of broadcaster perspective on it, I just was digging out, I've got an email here from 8:21 this morning from our great creative leader at Channel 4, saying, I wanted to say to you today how impressive the site is. It's not about this site, it's about something that went out last night. But it shows a sort of a generic point really, and how brilliantly it's been integrated into the programme. It genuinely feels like an experience that lives on after TX, and that rarely happens. So that's a really good kind of indication of creatively the direction of travel for Channel 4. And I think, you know, that's one of the reasons why, by and large, we're doing quite a lot of the sort of pushing of the envelope in this multi-platform space, because we've got that kind of backing and that kind of vision. Lady in the centre there with the dotty dress.
I was just going to ask, you know, that it rarely happens, and this is such an enormous thing that you can't do it that often. How often will you be doing this type of thing? Is there room for people to pitch in with massive campaigns that will, you know, or are you booked up for the next 5 years?
No, I mean, I think there's definitely room for it. We've just got to be really careful about how we do it and what we actually sort of pitch as a campaign versus maybe a sort of smaller scale initiative. They can't always be on this scale, and I think also particularly at this particular moment in history, it's quite a difficult time. I mean, there's a lot of campaigning going on in a lot of spaces, which makes it even more difficult. So we just, like I say, have to be really kind of judicious about it and not create campaign fatigue. This gentleman over here.
Simon Pardo from Public Space Research Communication. I really like what you've been doing, and I just want to raise a worry, without being negative as possible, following on from what was earlier said, which is that something becoming very strongly publicly supported can work two ways. And I'm thinking particularly of public reaction about nuclear waste, about GM crops, right through to the funeral of Lady Di. In each case, it's sort of followed by a kind of media sneer, which suddenly talks of the public reaction as being the reaction to the TV rather than a rational reaction to the event. And the reaction is then explained in terms of ignorance and emotion. And so it's got psychological and social explanations rather than being a rational response to that. And I wonder how you're going to deal with that when and if that comes with this, when people suddenly start saying, oh, well, all these people were misinformed and it wasn't rational.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's a good point and timely. I think we've seen it this week, actually, a little bit with the sentencing debate. Do any of you guys want to?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Damanaki is already being criticised in Europe from the some of the politicians who don't support a radical reform of the fisheries policy by saying that what she's saying and what she's planning is a knee-jerk reaction to a media campaign. And, you know, she is batting that back by saying, well, it is a media campaign, but it's also a campaign which shows enormous amounts of support. And actually, what I'm reacting to is the support, not the media campaign. That you know, so many hundreds of thousands of people are behind us, and which is why, again, she's asking us to go and extend it the other way. I mean, I completely take your point. I think it's a valid criticism, but you just have to, at some point, you have to put a stake in the ground and say, well, personally, we think that this is crazy. No one likes waste, especially not in a time of recession and, you know, rising food prices. Throwing back perfectly edible fish is just bonkers, and that's all we're trying to do, really, is say, let's try and stop it.
So probably got time for just one more question. That lady there, back.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Leslie Lee. I'm a development producer. I wanted to know how difficult it was to get the supermarkets to fold, as it were. I mean, thinking if Hugh wasn't the celebrity chef that he was, that he is, how difficult they would have had. You know, how hard would it have been for you to deal with them? Tesco and Sainsbury's, etc.
Very. I think, you know, Greenpeace has been campaigning on this issue for 4 years, and nobody's heard of it, except a few Greenpeace supporters. So they are, you know, thrilled by what we've done. But I personally believe it's all about the celebrity. Yeah.
We did it before on the chicken campaign as well, so we had some track record with those supermarkets. So I think if we were kind of threatening to mobilise lots of people against them, they did listen. You know.
I think Hugh's role is really critical in this, because not only does his face and celebrity lend a lot of weight, but also he's got a really deep and intelligent understanding of the whole issue and the processes. So there's really, you know, it'd be hard to find someone as well qualified and as well able to see this thing through to its conclusion and not sort of leave off prematurely.
And he's also not advertising any one supermarket, unlike some of the other chefs.
Yeah. I'm just going to let one quick question. This lady over here with the glasses, yeah.
Thank you. It was just that you were talking about Greenpeace and the 4-year campaign, and you've obviously worked with a lot of NGOs. I just wanted to know how you can make sure that the NGOs themselves do not then run into trouble when the campaign becomes bigger than anything that they can hope to cope with. And is there not a danger they might get left holding the kind of campaigning baby?
Yeah, absolutely, which is why we've, as Joe was saying earlier, we've delayed handing over. We're going to carry on looking after it for at least until the end of 2012, which is when the new Common Fisheries Policy is going to be announced and written into law. So we've got an 18-month period where we're going to stay in charge of it until then, thanks to this European money that we've got.
It's all about money, really.
Well, you know, it pays Joe and it pays me to stay on it as an exec, you know, regardless of what I go on and do. So, you know, that's why we were going to give it up, because we thought, well, no one's going to pay us to look after this thing, and we're both going to go and get new jobs on other things. But, you know, we didn't want to just start something and then, you know, leave it. And I think, you know, also we have a responsibility now that we've started it. We've been handed these kind of quite powerful cards, or we've dealt ourselves these quite powerful cards. We are in a very influential position now. So we sort of owe it to ourselves as human beings, as much as anything else, to carry on working with that, you know.
And it's quite interesting from a channel point of view. It puts you into a slightly strange place. So at the moment, I'm pursuing some money to try and support the European rollout, even though Channel 4's got a very clear UK remit. And in many ways, it's sort of slightly illogical to keep following that path, but it's part of the sort of responsibility once you sort of kick off something like this to show ongoing support, and also to try and help guide something towards a sort of sustainable position or to the handover point or whatever. We're going to have to call it a day there. We've just hit 11 o'clock.
One more thing, just once we realised that you could sign up, we realised that you could do anything with this. So if you text fish and splash, which I will do now, we've put a whole lot of hidden words in here, which hopefully trigger stupid things.
And on that note, if you could all show your appreciation to Will, Joe and Nick,